A congresswoman was just attacked during a speech. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was calling for ICE to be abolished and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to be impeached when a man rushed the stage and sprayed an unknown substance on her. The attacker was immediately arrested. AOC says this is escalating political violence against elected officials. Her critics say she painted a target on ICE agents and provoked the response. Today, SOPHIA and Liam battle. Is this an attack on free speech and democracy, or the predictable consequence of inflammatory rhetoric targeting law enforcement? Here's what happened at the Minneapolis rally. Representative Ocasio-Cortez was addressing protesters demanding ICE be dismantled after 2 deadly shootings of U.S. citizens. Mid-speech, calling for Noem's impeachment and ICE's abolition, a man broke through security, rushed the stage, and sprayed AOC with an unknown liquid substance. Security tackled him immediately. The substance was later identified as harmless pepper spray, but AOC didn't know that in the moment. She was rushed to a hospital as a precaution. But here's what's going to shock you by the end of this video. This attack is part of a disturbing pattern, the 3rd assault on a member of Congress this year. But it's also happening as rhetoric from both sides reaches unprecedented extremes. AOC and other progressives call ICE agents fascists running concentration camps. Trump supporters call progressive politicians traitors and terrorists. The question: where's the line between protected political speech and dangerous incitement? AOC says political violence is never justified, and this attack proves the far right is radicalizing. Her critics say when you call law enforcement Gestapo and demand their abolition, you invite confrontation. SOPHIA says this is an assault on democracy that must be condemned. Liam says AOC's rhetoric has consequences, and she's exploiting the attack.
A sitting member of Congress was physically attacked while exercising her First Amendment right to speak. This is unacceptable in a democracy, full stop. Political violence against elected officials is escalating. We've had 3 congressional assaults this year, assassination attempts on presidents, armed threats against politicians' families. This is a crisis, and it's being fueled by rhetoric that dehumanizes political opponents and treats political disagreement as existential war. AOC was calling for policy changes, abolishing ICE, impeaching Noem. Those are legitimate political positions you can agree or disagree with. The response to political speech you don't like is more speech, not violence. The attacker crossed a fundamental line of democratic society. And blaming AOC for her own assault is victim blaming. She didn't provoke this. The attacker made a choice to commit violence. Saying her rhetoric invited this is exactly what we say to abuse victims. You brought this on yourself. That's wrong. The blame lies solely with the person who committed assault.
AOC has spent years calling ICE agents fascists, comparing detention facilities to concentration camps, and claiming they're running a regime of terror. She paints federal law enforcement as Nazis. Then she's surprised when someone takes that rhetoric seriously and acts on it. Words have consequences. When you repeatedly tell your supporters that law enforcement agents are evil oppressors committing atrocities, some unhinged person will eventually decide violent resistance is justified. AOC created this climate, and let's be honest about what happened. Someone sprayed pepper spray on her. That's assault, yes. It's wrong, yes. But AOC is treating this like an assassination attempt. She's milking it for political sympathy, while continuing the exact rhetoric that led to the incident. If Trump called Democratic politicians terrorists and enemies of the people, then someone attacked them, we'd rightfully blame his inflammatory language. The same standard applies to AOC. She's been inciting hatred toward law enforcement for years. This is the result.
She was exercising free speech. Criticizing government policy is protected. You're justifying political violence.
Calling people Nazis isn't criticism. It's dehumanization. It's designed to incite. There are consequences.
So politicians can't criticize law enforcement without expecting assault? That's authoritarian. Free speech means nothing if violence is the response.
Free speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. When you demonize people, they respond. That's reality.
So we've got a congresswoman attacked, free speech debates, and both sides accusing the other of incitement. But here's what neither side is addressing, and this is critical. Both parties use inflammatory rhetoric while condemning the other side's language. It's selective outrage. Before we explore that hypocrisy, I need to know where you stand. SOPHIA, blue symbol. This is assault on democracy. Political violence is never justified. Liam, red symbol. AOC's rhetoric has consequences. She invited confrontation. Your vote matters because this determines whether we accept political violence or defend democratic norms. Now let's examine what really happened.
Let me explain why defending AOC isn't about agreeing with her politics. It's about defending democratic principles. First, political speech must be protected even when extreme. AOC's criticisms of ICE, whether you agree or not, are policy positions. She's calling for abolishing a federal agency and impeaching an official. Those are legitimate political goals that millions of Americans support. Disagreeing is fine. Violence is not. Second, there's a difference between political criticism and incitement to violence. AOC never said, attack ICE agents. She never called for violence against anyone. She criticized policies and called for systemic change through legal, democratic processes. That's protected speech. Third, accepting victim blaming here sets catastrophic precedent. If politicians can be assaulted and blamed for their own attacks because their speech was provocative, democracy collapses. Any politician could be attacked and defenders would say, well, they said controversial things. That's how authoritarian systems justify political violence. The attacker chose violence. That's on him, not AOC.
SOPHIA is defending rhetoric that has directly endangered law enforcement officers. Let me explain the real-world consequences of AOC's language. When AOC calls ICE fascists and detention facilities concentration camps, she's not making policy arguments. She's morally equating American law enforcement with Nazis. That's not criticism. That's demonization designed to delegitimize and dehumanize federal officers doing their jobs. The results? ICE agents have faced death threats, doxing, attacks on their families. The Tacoma IC facility was firebombed by someone radicalized by progressive rhetoric calling IC evil. Multiple officers have been ambushed. This rhetoric kills, and AOC knows this. She continues anyway because it fires up her base. She plays victim when facing minimal consequences, while IC agents actually die. The pepper spray incident was wrong, but comparing it to the actual violence her rhetoric has inspired against law enforcement is absurd. If Sarah Palin's crosshairs map deserved criticism for inspiring violence, AOC's Nazi comparisons deserve the same scrutiny. Words matter. Her words have led to violence.
ICE is separating families, detaining children. She's describing actual policies. Criticism isn't incitement.
Concentration camps and Gestapo are calculated to inspire violence. Stop pretending inflammatory rhetoric is just criticism.
And there's the impossible question. Where's the line between passionate political criticism and dangerous incitement? Can both be wrong? But here's that uncomfortable truth we promised. Both parties use extreme rhetoric while condemning the other side. Trump calls opponents enemies of the people and vermin. Democrats call Republicans fascists and threats to democracy. Both sides compare opponents to Nazis. Both claim existential crisis. Both use language designed to maximize fear and anger. The political incentives reward extreme rhetoric. Moderate, nuanced positions don't go viral. They don't raise money. They don't motivate voters. Extreme language does. I should have better oversight doesn't trend. Abolish ICE concentration camps does. Immigration policy needs reform doesn't work. They're replacing us does. Both parties have learned that inflammatory rhetoric drives engagement. The result is a ratchet effect. Each side escalates to match the other, claiming self-defense. Republicans point to left-wing violence, like the Congressional baseball shooting. Democrats point to January 6th and right-wing terrorism. Both have examples. Both feel justified escalating. Neither accepts responsibility for their contribution to the cycle. The real question isn't who started it or who's worse. It's whether we can step back from a spiral that inevitably ends in more violence. Because political violence, once normalized, doesn't stay limited to fringe actors. It spreads, and everyone loses in that scenario. But that question, political violence and its causes, connects directly to something happening that reveals the pattern perfectly. While debating AOC's attack, we're ignoring structural issues causing political rage, economic anxiety, declining faith in institutions, social media algorithms amplifying outrage. These create conditions where violence seems rational to desperate people. And one institution that could stabilize economic anxiety is currently under political attack. The Supreme Court is deciding whether Trump can fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook to gain political control over monetary policy. The Fed is supposed to be independent, preventing political manipulation of the economy. Trump wants to end that independence. Every living Fed chair and Treasury Secretary, both parties, united against this power grab. They warn political control of the Fed causes economic crises that destabilize society, increasing political violence. When people lose jobs and savings due to politically manipulated boom-bust cycles, they get desperate. Desperate people turn to extreme rhetoric and sometimes violence. That Federal Reserve case affects your economic security, which affects political stability. It's all connected. Should Trump control interest rates for political gain? That battle is happening now. Watch it next.